All right, man. Welcome to Pro 777 Radio. This is episode 575. It's just me and Jason today. We're going to be talking about socialism. And I don't remember who the quote comes from, but there is a quote out there in the world that's relatively well known that calls socialism the previous step before communism. That's one of the ways it's looked at. And to be honest, this whole left wing, right wing thing, it's so manipulated at this point that it's not actually that helpful to frame things in that way. I mean, in one way it is, and in another it's not. Like certain forms of communism, if you ask people if they're left or right, you're going to get different ideas about that. At least I have, and I didn't think that was even the case, to be honest with you. I was speaking with Fortune, and he launched into a whole thing about it. But anything you want to add? You wrote these notes, Jason. We should probably mention the telescope before we jump in, but do you want to tee up anything about the socialism notes?
Well, history shows that that is absolutely true. Socialism is the road to communism.
You know, and I don't think anyone should be mystified about what's happened in the world here. Basically, a country called America that was pretty much self-sufficient. We built the best things in the world. That was all dismantled. And in my lifetime, that started to become very apparent in the 80s with the car companies. All of a sudden, we can't make cars because we can't compete with the world market. Well, these were all chess pieces moving on the board. As we covered so long ago, the tech that China did not have, they were busy pirating everything back in the day. And I think it was, 97, 98, I don't remember the date. It was that summer, there was a picnic, and I kid you not, in Silicon Valley, where basically the movers and shakers handed China all the tech they needed to catch up and actually surpass. I don't know who has the most powerful AI, but there were claims in the earliest decade of the 2000s that China's AI was more advanced than ours, which is actually not that hard to imagine because they have an internet that most of us can't deal with for language problems, and our internet is open, so they just scrape it. China's holding dossiers on every person in the world that's connected to the web. Right now in government, they're making a big to-do about TikTok because of the power of a platform like that to shape views. So what we're talking about here is basically the demonstration as China. What China did was took all the tech they were given. Their version of Facebook basically has everything: police, hospital, payments, just everything is their version of Facebook. And was there ever a lawsuit? No. Silicon Valley gave them the tech to get up to speed. And why? Well, from my point of view, they were tasked with demonstrating that they could control, using communism and technology, every single human being. And that's what they've done. They have successfully shown the model can be operated. So when we talk about socialism here, the prevailing view, as Jason mentioned, is that that's one step away from communism. And it is my point of view that ultimately whatever it would be called, technical communism with tech, is basically the wet dream of those trying to take over the world. Reduce population and then control everybody through technology. Anyhow, anything else, or should we talk about the scope a little?
Let's do the scope.
So I finally got weather suitable enough to set up my telescope. I have a Lunt solar telescope. It's 130 millimeters, which is quite big for a solar telescope. And it is filming in hydrogen alpha wavelengths, and it has a double stack. The double stack is basically a double filtering system. If you remove one, you can see the prominences a little better. If you use the other stacked together, you see the surface detail a little bit better. I have posted my first images that I have attempted to process, and the data is pretty low quality because I'm not up to speed. Truth be told, from where I sit, filming the sun is much more difficult on so many levels than filming what I used to do in the night sky. Anyhow, if you go over to Twitter, you can see the initial first image. I think Rose has posted them on Facebook and other places. And then you can see the progression on where I'm trying to go. My goal is to be able to collect as many hours of data as I can, then speed it up because you can't see the sun moving most of the time with your eye. So what you do is you film it over hours, then you take maybe 2-3 hours, and each hour becomes 10 to 15 seconds animated, at which point you can see the sun is alive. Anyhow, anything you want to mention, or shall we jump in?
Well, the idea is to demonstrate what the sun may actually be and what it might not be.
Right. I'm going to try to locate the sun we don't see again. And this all takes time, and I just can't underscore how difficult it is. And part of the problem is I got a massive aperture, which is basically the diameter of my telescope. And what that means is when the seeing is bad, which is always a problem when filming the sun, that large aperture makes it worse. But when the seeing is good, that large aperture opens up a window of amazement. But anyhow, we got a ton of notes, Jason. I'm sure people will talk about it. Maybe we'll open up a forum thread or something. So let's jump in.
So what is socialism? Socialism is a political and economic theory of social organization which advocates that the means of production, distribution, and exchange should be owned or regulated by the community as a whole. The bland, smooth surface of socialism hides its true intent: a federal world government under socialist control in which we, the people, will be their slaves in a new world order of the new dark age.
So what's the whole, remember the thing Fortune was saying? So if, I don't remember how it goes. Actually, I'm not even going to go there because I don't remember how exactly he laid it down.
If the government owns the corporations, that's communism. If the corporations own the government, that's fascism.
Okay, there you go. I couldn't put it together. It's been a while since I've spoken with him. But basically what's going on here is you're seeing a marketing tactic that's always applied with socialism. Oh, it's for the people. All the people are equal. You own this. And the fact is you don't. It's a bit like our national parks, right? In America. Well, the people own those, right? Well, no, we don't. We have to ask permission. We have to buy tickets. I mean, it's far from the people own anything. It is a tight form of control, I guess is how I would describe it.
They even put it in the names of the countries, like the People's Republic of China. It's like, no, it's not. That's laughable.
There's an interesting marketing. Matter of fact, we should consider doing a show on this. If you look at the marketing that was put into the communism push for Russia and look at the marketing that was then manufactured off those ideas in places like China, you can see how much of this is, it's basically just marketing, how they implement these things.
Quote, "We will build the New World Order piece by piece right under their noses," meaning the American people. "The house of the New World Order will have to be built from the bottom up rather than from the top down. An end run around sovereignty, eroding it piece by piece, will accomplish much more than the old-fashioned frontal attack." And that is from Richard Gardner, leading American socialist Foreign Affairs, the Journal of the Council on Foreign Relations, the CFR, April 1974.
How is it that we live in a world where anyone can look up what Jason just read? And this was written roughly 12 years after I was born, 11 years after I was born, and nothing has been done about it. And when he says right under their noses, they are not kidding. And when you look at every single event that has occurred in this world since roughly the 90s, you can see the absolute erosion of so-called sovereignty and rights. Look at 9/11, which will always be the gold standard. What was lost at 9/11? The world post 9/11, at least where I live, is nothing like even the 90s. And the 90s were a muted version of the 80s. And I will say again, I was born in 1963, and oddly enough, my lifetime stands as really a bracketing around the takeover of the world through America.
Deception is the hallmark of socialism. Its motto, which is "make haste slowly," is deceptive because socialism has not gone slowly, and it is not a friend of the working people. Socialism is communism that is proceeding more cautiously, but the goals are the same, although the means differ in some instances. The common goal of communism and socialism is to liquidate the true capitalist free enterprise system and replace it with a strong central government which has control of every aspect of production and distribution of goods and services. Anyone who stands in their way is immediately labeled reactionary, right-wing extremist, a McCarthy reactionary, fascist, religious extremist, and so on. When you hear these words spoken, then you know the speaker is a socialist. Communism and socialism have as their common objective an ushering in of a federal, one-world government, or as it has become more popularly known, the New World Order.
Which isn't even actually, the way it looks right now, an honest assessment. If I was to ask everybody listening, in America, who's in control? Is it our so-called corporation that we call government? Or is it the richest corporations in the world? Which is which? You can make the argument in both directions. But when all is said and done, what's happened here is they've allowed free enterprise to kick down every wall and form wealth and control at levels we've never seen. I think it was the 70s when so-called Ma Bell, or the almighty telephone company, was told, hey, man, you can't have a monopoly. You got to share all your stuff. They did it again for the big media show with Bill Gates and the Internet Explorer browser. It's claimed he didn't know what the internet was going to be, and so they were lagging. But at the end of the day, the court told them to knock it off, but they destroyed all the competition in the meantime. These are calculated plays. So while they're removing this so-called free enterprise or the capitalist system, it is that very system which has allowed them to do so. I mean, don't you think, Jason?
Yeah, you remember Netscape Navigator? I bet you a lot of people out there don't.
My first job in the tech world was creating the earliest banner ads. And I ended up making the earliest video ads, these little ridiculous postage stamp size things running at 3 frames a second, or if it was high quality video, it was 8 frames a second. It's a joke. But anyhow, that's what we were doing. We had to test across every browser. The best thing going at that point was Netscape. And that is what got destroyed by Microsoft. And Microsoft was found wrong, basically, told to knock it off, told they couldn't have a monopoly. But what was going on behind the scene was all the competition was being removed, and it was removed.
The British Fabian Society is a socialist society founded in 1884 in London, having as its goal the establishment of a democratic socialist state in Great Britain. The name Fabian was chosen after a Roman general of note, whose tactics were said to be based upon waiting patiently for the enemy to make a mistake and then striking hard. The Fabians put their faith in evolutionary socialism rather than in revolution. There's an account of the various socialist goals set by the British Fabian Society, whose motto, as previously stated, is make haste slowly. When asked to explain communism, Vladimir Lenin replied, "Communism is socialism in a hurry." If you take a moment to think about it, socialism has nowhere to progress but to communism. It has now become quite obvious in the modern day that so many of the ills that plague our society today have their origin in careful socialist planning and execution. Fabian socialism began with the Fabian Society, which, in their words, consists of socialists who allied themselves with the Communist Manifesto of 1848, written by Karl Marx, a Prussian-born Jew who lived the better part of his life in Highgate, London.
How is it that this Prussian thing always leaks in? We've done the connection to our schooling, but let's back up. I'll draw a line for everybody. The Fabian Society, most people are aware of it. As a matter of fact, in the 60s, there was a big singer called Fabian. Where do you suppose he got his name? Now that you've been told what the 60s music scene was meant to do and what it actually accomplished, beyond a doubt. The Fabian Society is the reason we have the idea of 1984. Why? because it's exactly 100 years in 1984 after the recognition or the setup or wherever they want to stamp their little starting point for the Fabian Society. Fortune had a hell of a lot to say about this. So now when you go back and look at our schooling, which was put together to do a single thing, to teach you how to get along in a system and to tell you nothing about the environment, the actual truthful environment in which these man-made systems are run. The Fabian Society brought us the book 1984, or maybe you want to put it the other way around. We got the book 1984 because of the Fabian Society. How is it that in every school in this country and many others, that book is on the mandatory reading list? Most people hear about it somewhere between 7th and 9th grade, sometimes 10th grade for the first time. But that's not the half of it. We also got Brave New World, usually mandatory reading. Animal Farm, usually mandatory reading. And of course, 1984 was maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I thought, oh, I haven't read this in a long time. I'll go read it. It is such a miserable tome that I couldn't get past the first few pages, couldn't subject myself to it again. So why is it that we have this bizarre schooling system and we had these mandatory books that we had to read, like Lord of the Flies was among them, which is absolutely about societal breakdown, societal takeover, slavery, a downward trajectory? Do you see what's gone on here? Do you see that all the systems that we took as normal were actually, what are they going to call it? Communism taking its time?
Socialism actually seems to have been born with the founding of the Ethical Society of Culture, formerly the Fellowship of New Life in New York. The spiritual side of socialism, however, should not be ignored. Most of the members of the Fellowship of New Life, which preceded the Ethical Society of Culture, were Freemasons who had been affiliated with Madame Blavatsky's occult theosophy. Things always seem to tie back to occult practices of some sort.
And why is that? And why is it that when you hear the word occult, you think, oh, that's a no-no. That's a dark thing that I need to not be anywhere near? Because you've been trained that way. Why are they using it? Because it reflects nature, and nature only tells you the truth. So anything an occult person can pull off is because the actual creation is allowing it or providing for it. And if they choose to go to the dark side, that's what they're doing. But nonetheless, whatever it is they have done is an actual demonstration of the truth and the reality of the environment in which we have all been trained to get along in man-made systems. It's almost like there's a natural, truthful bubble around us, but we've been trained in such a way that we live in an inner bubble that allows us to have jobs, buy houses, make money, but it keeps us completely blind from truth and the reality reflected only by nature. And the occult has been pushed off the table and made to seem dark and evil. To be fair, many people do use it in a dark and evil way, but it's like everything else in this world of duality. You don't have to go dark. You don't. It's like a knife. You can make beautiful things, or an axe, or many tools, or you could turn it into a heinous weapon.
Socialism is inherently evil because it forces people to accept deliberately engineered changes that they have neither requested nor wanted. The power of socialism is disguised in soothing terms and hides behind a mask of humanitarianism. It is also found in far-reaching, fundamental changes in religion, which the socialists have long used as a potent vehicle for gaining acceptance, after which they spread their influence inside churches to the detriment of all religion.
And I would remind everybody out there that organized religion, almost in totality at this point, they're corporations. Does a corporation have anything to do with the spiritual path and intent of a living man or woman? But Jason's opening line here, it's almost like this could be the epitaph for the modern era. Socialism is inherently evil because it forces people to accept deliberately engineered changes that they have neither requested nor that they want. That's kind of like the blueprint to our lives right now.
Well, that's the traditional way that they did it, but we have to actually kind of update that for the modern era. They know that the youth is the way to get something done. So they're using the modern technology to pound their little heads with this nonsense and this gobbledygook. And now they're out there trying to enforce it when they don't even remotely understand it or where it leads to.
You know, the movie Idiocracy is such an accurate reflection of the goals where this is headed. So many of the young people right now, you could ask them, what's a continent? They've never been told. And then they're made fun of online. Well, whose fault is it actually? Wouldn't that actually be their parents' fault, their teachers' fault? Actually, isn't it society's fault as a whole to allow a young generation to have really no idea at all of the most basic things? I suppose we could flip that on our head and say things like, we don't even know what shape the continent we're standing on is. That's true. We don't know how many continents there are. That is also true. But in our taught ignorance, at least there is the possibility for some worldview and an inclination to try to know more. The young people now are under the gun so hard that it is almost unimaginable. And online, everyone is being trained to make fun of them. And this is all part and parcel of the plan. All part and parcel of the plan. So the next time you turn on TikTok or YouTube and you see some jackass out there making fun of Generation Z, shake his hand and thank him for helping along the socialist agenda.
The goal of socialism is the liquidation of the free enterprise system, which is true capitalism. Scientific socialism goes under several disguises, and its promoters call themselves liberals or moderates. They wear no badge and are not recognizable, as they would be if they just openly called themselves communists. Executive orders are an unconstitutional socialist ruse to use the legislative route to make the Constitution of the United States of no effect, where direct methods are not possible to bring about the desired socialist changes that would be blocked by the Constitution.
How many generations has it been, if I had to venture a guess? Maybe I won't even venture a guess, but in school for young people, how many people have any idea of what the Constitution is, what's in it, or have they ever read it? And this is another ploy. There will come a generation where probably the word Constitution isn't even known to them if we keep on this course.
There are people, usually younger people, who actively want to destroy this country now. They have it in their heads that the United States is imperialism and colonialism, and that it should be given back to the peoples that it was taken from.
This too is marketing, but it's based on a truth, right? Powerful things happen in this world, and the weaker people always get trampled. And can you defend that honestly? So in that kernel of truth, again, you see the agenda to sow unsatisfaction. And when you're sowing unsatisfaction into a generation that's had precious little learning in the first place and have been tied to a manufactured digital internet, which is basically majority controlled information. I mean, if you're on TikTok, if you're on YouTube, if you're on Facebook, let's be honest here. Can you talk honestly about the most important topics that you think you should be able to talk about? The answer to that is no. And that is the primary source of learning. And that is the primary source of experience for the young generations who did not know anything, couldn't possibly have experienced the analog age, which was closer to nature.
Socialism is revolution without openly violent methods. Nevertheless, it does the utmost violence to the psyche of the nation. It is a movement that is governed by stealth. Its slow advance on the United States from its home base in England was almost imperceptible up to the 1950s. The Fabian socialist movement remains distinct from so-called socialist party groups, and its forward crawl was thus almost imperceptible to the majority of Americans. When you wound a communist, a socialist bleeds is a saying that dates back to the early days of Fabian socialism.
Jason, what's the guy's name, the old British guy who goes around the world talking about wildlife? You know who I'm talking about? He's probably in his 80s. Sir David
Attenborough?
Yeah, Sir David Attenborough. I am told by good authority that he is a Fabian, pushing the Fabianist agenda. And I can't even I used to love to watch the natural programs because I get to see parts of the world that I'll never see. But if you watch it now, it's unwatchable because of the agenda that's been piled on. All you're going to hear is this species endangered, extinction, extinction, extinction. Humans are the problem. We've ruined the world. You know, it goes on and on and on. And regardless of how you feel about the truth of that statement, it's an agenda. This was demonstrated in Africa with all the wildlife movements that were there to protect the animals and do this and do that. But what was actually going on is whether or not they were protecting animals, what they were absolutely doing was corralling human beings and limiting the rights of human beings to the point now where you can see the Bushmen of the Kalahari. I am told in some places it is illegal for them to hunt. Why? Oh, because all those species are going extinct. So we have a group of human beings, which arguably could be some of the oldest human beings in this world. Now you can't hunt. And by the way, you've got to come eat modern food. So you go look at these groups of ethnic peoples now, they're overweight, they're unhealthy. Why? Because they can't live as they've lived for millennia, basically. And that is on the back of the socialist agenda, the communist agenda, and the Fabian Society, of which I am told Sir, is it Richard Attenborough or David Attenborough, is a high-ranking member and on every TV in the world. So we did a quick look up. It's David Attenborough. What is it, 1927 or something he was born? Is it 26 or 27, Jason?
26.
26. So he's in his upper 90s now. Pretty spry, right? I guess if you know the right people in this world and you're not using allopathic medicine, which is part of everything we are talking about here, designed to cure nothing, designed to shorten lives. When did it come to us? Well, remember the market crash of 1929? What followed in the 30s was the removal of so many pretty old practices that were very effective. One of those would be holistic medicine that actually cured things. These are the things that have, like a chessboard gone wild, been slowly replaced and removed from our world by the likes of Fabians and others who are dead set on taking over the entire world, reducing the world population, and basically turning the bulk of the remaining people into drooling idiots, with also the use of drugs. Did anyone read Brave New World? What was it called? Soma? Yeah, that's on the table too.
Socialism ardently welcomes proliferation of central government power, which they strive to secure for themselves, always pretending it to be for the common good. The United States and Britain are full to the brim with false prophets pushing the New World Order. These socialist missionaries preach peace and humanitarianism and common good, fully aware that they could not overcome the resistance of the American people to communism by direct means. The insidious Fabian socialists knew they had to move silently and slowly and avoid alerting the people to their real objectives. Thus was scientific socialism adopted as the way to overcoming the United States and making of it the leading socialist country in the world.
I mean, let's ask the question. People get pissed off, but so what? Are we better described as a socialist country or a democracy? I mean, what would you say, Jason? Just your personal point of view.
Well, we're certainly not a democracy.
Well, we're certainly not, and we've never been a democracy. As a matter of fact, even on the world stage in mainstream media, if you look up a list of all the countries they choose to recognize and say which are the most democratic, you'll always see the United States listed quite far down the loop. But in reality, they're going to say, well, it's actually a republic. But my point is, right now, if you take a look at this country, what fits better? The idea of a republic or the idea of some form of socialism? And the reason I ask is because we've shown what the elections are. There has never been an election in this country, to my knowledge, at least from the 1900s forward, where voting took any course in seating things like the president. You're being polled. That's why the college was designed, right? That's the whole idea. It's those votes within that little circle that seat the president. But what do you think, Jason? If I was going to say this is a republic or this resembles socialism, which one is a better description at this point?
We are a constitutional republic as far as the framework, but there are many socialist things that have been integrated into our society. But this is why you hear the mockingbird mainstream media always saying stupid things like this is a danger to our democracy. It's like, well, that's great. We don't have a democracy.
Yeah, go look up that little ploy. Someone put a clip together where there's literally 100 local news stations saying verbatim the exact line that Jason just stated. Why? Because they got their marching orders from on high. But when you get to the point where the Social Security number gets issued and there's an idea that you retire, that is far away. And we can't see it anymore because we're so used to the idea. And we've all worked our whole lives to pay into that. But it's these types of things which make a society less self-sufficient. By the time you get down to all the services that are offered as safety nets, these are all within the design of what we're talking about.
How far Fabian's socialism has succeeded and where we stand today, we will discuss in this episode, heavily drawn from the work of Dr. John Coleman. Presidents Wilson, Roosevelt, Eisenhower, Carter, Kennedy, and Johnson were eager, willing servants of Fabian socialism. Their mantle was passed to President Bill Clinton, and certainly through to today. Democracy and socialism go hand in hand. All United States presidents since Wilson have repeatedly stated that the United States is a democracy, when in fact it is a constitutional republic. Fabian socialism directs the destiny of the world in a way which is disguised to render it unrecognizable. Socialism is the author of graduated income tax, the destroyer of nationalism, the author of so-called free trade.
Now, free trade came big in my lifetime. I want to say that it came really into the spotlight with the Clintons. I hope I have that right. But that free trade idea is, you can tie it all day long to the Fabian socialist ideas. And it was not palatable earlier in American life, even a decade earlier in American life. And by the time they started dismantling Detroit, which at one point was commonly referred to as the heartbeat of America, you would constantly hear things like, what's good for Detroit is good for America. And then the 80s came along, Detroit got to go. And you get a guy like, what's the dude's name who did Roger and Me? You know, this mainstream movie that's meant to look like somebody somewhere gives a damn. And what we've done here is we've just completely slipped into the plans. But here in the modern age, there are a lot of people who are beginning to recognize, like, why is the WEF or the UN have power over anyone? They're corporations. And this has been inserted in our movies. If you go look at a movie like, let me think of an example. Here's one, Iron Man 2. There's a point in Iron Man 2 where Pepper Potts, who is a CEO, you could question whether she should be, is actually taking control of the local police in her area and directing them and telling them what to do and who to arrest. And that perception of corporations somehow being above is cleverly inserted so that when we come across it in real life, it just seems like it's normal to us.
You were referring to Michael Moore, who's a real Hollywood piece of work.
He's a shill. That whole movie is meant to be, I grew up here and look at the terrible things they're doing. But what it's actually doing is it's pushing an agenda. And it's also a bit like the 9/11 rhetoric, because at this point, everyone knows 9/11 was a put up, but nobody has done a damn thing about it. And what that actually means is we have given our tacit permission, or at least that's the way they perceive it. In their minds, there is no higher gain, get, or grab than tacit permission. And the way this is done is some atrocious thing like 9/11 is done and then lied about. Oh, someone else did it. Those guys did it. Well, we're not quite sure who did it. Grassy Knoll, was there one shooter? Was there 10 shooters? Nobody knows how many shooters there were, and on it goes. Well, we're going to set up a commission. Okay, let's get the Warren Commission. Okay, let's get the 9/11 Commission. And they go and they go and they go and they print these massive books of BS. And then eventually it starts to leak out that everything we've been told is wrong. And then it starts to become common knowledge that the very people who were doing the investigation were complicit in the act. At that point, tacit permission is collected. And in James Shelby Downard's work, Michael Hoffman's work, this is the revelation of method. I would argue all day long that JFK was designed to someday be common knowledge, that it was a put up. I would argue all day long that 9/11 is no different. But with 9/11, I would argue that there was actually a rough period of time intended when it would be pretty much common knowledge to most people that it was an inside job. That's one of the most insidious tactics, because even if you know it's happening, I'm not sure how you could combat it. You can't. There's just too many people. There's just too many people doing too many things.
Having withdrawn from the Fellowship of the New Life, Fabian socialism tried several paths already trodden by communists, Bakunists, Babuovists or anarchists, and Karl Marx, always vehemently denying any connection with these movements. Consisting mainly of intellectuals, civil servants, journalists, and publishers like Victor Galant's, Fabian socialism had no interest in getting involved with street-fighting anarchist revolutionaries. The founder members of Fabian socialism perfected the technique first used by Adam Weishaupt, which was that of penetrating the Catholic Church and then boring away from inside until just an empty husk was left. It was called penetration and permeation. Apparently neither Weishaupt nor Galant's thought Christians would be smart enough to see what was happening. Galant's was reported as saying, "Christians are not exactly bright, so it will be easy for socialism to lead them down the garden path through their ideals of brotherly love and social justice." Fabian socialism targeted political, economic, and educational organizations, in addition to the Christian church. Later, Galantz's left-wing books gave special discounts to Christians who were interested in socialist ideas.
This is a paragraph of the utmost importance. I would rewind it and listen again. The Fabians were not interested in street fighting. Why? Well, because that's how things get out of control. And the last thing people who are taking over the world want is loss of control. So you can almost look back through history where there was actually truly fighting going on, true fighting, and how much control is there. Usually what happens is the battles are allowed to happen, and whatever the outcome, it doesn't really matter to the overall plan. When I was in Marine Corps boot camp, we were told about the amazing Marines that stood above all others, Chesty Puller and others. They made a movie about Smedley Butler recently, which shows a run of these rich businessmen trying to take over the country. It's just a movie based on exactly what we're talking about. And Smedley Butler held his ground and went against it all. But Jason just went on to talk about the tactic called penetration and permeation. Show me a major system, a major corporation, a major governmental center, a major news outlet that hasn't been penetrated and permeated. You can't do it. You cannot do it. And how do I know this is true? Because when 2020 comes along and all of a sudden these ridiculous rules, like you got to stand 6 feet apart from everyone, you can't go visit your dying mother and father because there's this magical thing that might kill you. And by the way, you need to veil your spirit or your breath every time you're out in public. And it was enforced. Who was it enforced by? How many times did you see the police or any big authority enforcing that? It was the people who were enforcing it. And why? Because all the systems around them had been penetrated and permeated. This tactic is insidious on a level. I mean, look at the example given here, the Vatican, the Catholic Church. Is there any bigger example?
Fabian, socialism set out from the very beginning of its history to penetrate and permeate the British Labour and Liberal parties, and as it turned out, also the Democrat Party in the United States. It was relentless in its zeal and energy to create feminist socialism, at which it was to become highly successful. Socialism succeeded in gaining the ascendancy of school boards, town councils, and labor unions under the guise of bettering the lot of the working man. Fabian socialism's determination to capture education mirrors what Madame Zinoviev had long counseled in Bolshevik Russia. Ivy League schools such as Harvard and Yale were infiltrated early on. The Fabian socialists' hierarchy considered control of education the kingpin in their strategy to capture the world.
And it's come off like a dream in many ways, not in all ways. I could recall a night speaking with Fortune about the Bolshevik Revolution, and by the time I got off that call, my freaking mouth was hanging open. It's like being told this insidious plan to do damage, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. And it's what's worse is you're watching the damage occur, but you're also aware of all this damage that's coming later, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. And that's kind of how all this was put together. At the end of the day, this really does come down to weeding out people who have simply given up or can no longer take care of themselves, have no desire to be anything but a follower. These are the community centers that are being hit the hardest. The truth is, we've been granted the divine spark. The truth is, we've been granted free will. That is a big deal. It's also a curse, by the way. But it means nobody can make you do anything. You could even choose to die if you were threatened in that way before you did a thing you didn't want to do. Lastly, we were actually granted as beneficiaries of this creation. When those ideals come to the surface, then the world will begin to change back in a better direction. But the damage has been done here, and the damage is being done here. And it's insidious at a level that it's like, it always makes me think of Tibet. You know, you had a culture there, regardless of what you think of them, they were nonviolent for over a millennium, and they didn't stand a chance. And the problem with looking at this is you start to come to this logical problem where good can never win. And actually, in everything Jason's just read, there's that idea. Well, these stupid Christians have ideas of brotherly love and social justice, decency. And this is the illustration that tries to convince you that decency cannot prevail, except that's not true. And how do I know it's not true? Because I have learned from the creation what is true. And what is true is there's brutality. That is undeniable. Watch a lion take down a zebra and then try to tell me different. But there's also beauty and decency and all this whole other spectrum. But as this onslaught goes forward, that's what's being removed. And regardless of what happens, we will inherit what we deserve. And that is also a sad truth.
Between 1905 and 1910, socialist Graham Wallas wrote The Great Society, which was to become the blueprint for President Johnson's program of the same name, and which embodied social psychology principles. Wallas made it very plain that the object of social psychology was to control human conduct, thus preparing the masses for the coming socialist state that would ultimately lead them into slavery, although he was careful not to spell it out that far. Wallas became a conduit into the United States for Fabian socialists' ideas, much of them going into Roosevelt's New Deal, written by socialist Stuart Chase, Kennedy's New Frontier, written by socialist Henry Wallace, and Johnson's Great Society, written by Graham Wallas. From these facts alone, the tremendous impact of Fabian socialism upon the American political scene can be gauged.
Wait a minute. Did you just say JFK in there somewhere? I thought he was going against the grain and somebody killed him. How could it be that he's okay with what the Fabians are doing? Wait a minute. He was the first Catholic president, right? And on we go here. But human control and conduct is stated as one of the things they're gaining control of. And this really underscores the danger of artificial intelligence. I would never be able to illustrate, no matter how hard I tried, the unimaginable power that AI gives someone. It's probably more powerful than a time machine. Because if you had a time machine and you could jump to next week, then there's the whole idea of, oh, you changed something, however that would shake out. What AI does is allows you to stay in the minute you're in and come up with a 98 or a 99% certainty. And what's it based on? It's based on modeling everything that has ever been. How does AI create a picture of Whistler's mother done in the style of Van Gogh? Well, easy. It's used every art ever made, every Van Gogh ever made, everything ever made, and it's instantly, within seconds, created some great masterpiece in another great master's style. There is nothing in the human experience that can't be gained and fed into AI. What's even worse is, as we exist now, there are groups of people with AI and masses of data in this world who know infinitely more about you than you will ever know about yourself. And that is a fact, whether you choose to believe it or not. The entirety of putting a cell phone in everyone's pocket is completely misviewed. What a world change it was, right? I've heard people say so many times, how did we used to find each other, right? All the friends want to get together and meet for dinner. Well, we did it. And as a matter of fact, it wasn't a big deal, but now we can't imagine how that was done. So thank you, corporations, for bringing the cell phone. Now let me flip the table for you. The cell phone is almost certainly ensuring that it will take much longer for us to speak mind to mind, because human beings have that possibility. And it's been demonstrated and proven endlessly. It collects every bit of data of your life to include your location all day, every day. But there's more. Everyone you interact with. Oh, but there's more. You also use Facebook. That was created to do exactly what I'm describing. It was never an intention to create a handy tool so people could do things. It was a data collection platform at the highest level to collect more data than had ever been collected, because they knew AI needed a lot of data, and they knew AI was on the way, because even the algorithms for that, as was pointed out in The Winter Soldier, were probably written sometime in the 1930s or something like that. So all these systems have made transparent our darkest secrets, our most open actions, the history of the world, every piece of art, every piece of literature, anything that has ever been made by the hands of men or women is now powering the AI. And I think people need to wake up to that fact, which is why I'm always harping on the Butlerian Jihad, which some magical guy who wrote the Book of Dune happened to know about in the 1950s into the early 60s when he was writing it. How could he possibly have fathomed the need for a Butlerian Jihad unless he got a peek at the script. But Jason and I have drawn that line too. He was within the center of people that came over from Britain. It's all the same gang doing the major publishing. At the end of the day, the technical tools that are going to be brought to bear will know what you are going to do before you do it in most cases. This is what we have to wake up to now, and this is what we have to contend with.
So take a look at most of the key players, probably almost all of the key players who are programming these large language models that make up these artificial intelligence systems. And once you do see what they're like and where they're coming from, you'll understand why they have such high failure rates with a lot of people. But anyway, in hour 2, we've got a long way to go with the history. And at the end of hour 2, we're going to go through 7 points that we can ask ourselves. Is the United States a socialist country?
Well, I don't want to destroy the story before it gets read, so I'll keep my mouth shut there. But hopefully, by the time this comes out, the eclipse will be behind us. I'm not even sure if I've got another 10 days. Right now, it is the 23rd of March. The eclipse coming on the 8th, which will be behind you when you hear this. For me to get up to speed with 10 days of bad weather in front of me, it's going to be a crapshoot. I'm going to do what I can. But as I do get up to speed and I am able to capture the level that I think matters, or maybe I'll decide to just show the path of where I'm starting and where I'm getting to, that's going to be available only to membership of crow777radio.com. It'll probably show up under the videos tab or something like that. There will never come a time again when I dedicate my life to any amount of work that matters and I cede control to social media platforms like I unfortunately did with the lunar wave, which is now controlled by YouTube. We will keep control of all my work and we will make it available to membership, and we will talk freely and exercise free speech about all of it. One of my big goals here is to try to offer a different way to view basically the light of this world. With that in mind, this has been hour 1 of episode 575 with Jason Lindgren. Hour 1 is free to everybody at crow777radio.com. Members know to log in for the full episode. Members get access to forums. They can create forums. They get access to all the comment sections. They will get access to all the new video when I begin to post it, and they can stream Shoot the Moon anytime they like it right from the site. With that, we're going to prep up for hour 2 on socialism. Why don't we just call it America at this point? And I hope to see you logged in as a member. So there it is, man. I'd like to wish you all a happy, healthy, and higher-minded new